Well, welcome to the podcast today, Gary. Here we are. This is going to be a great program. There's so much going on in the news, and last week I'd love to get your thoughts on some of these topics because when we think about China, the kings of the East, and their latest connections with Russia. Just in general, if I just throw China, biblically, what do you think? What's China? Well, what are they going to do? Are they going to be a power player in the end?
Well, China has made foodstuffs, automobiles, electronics, you name it, parts for cars, strategic production lines in China that go all over the world, but especially to the United States. And when we think of China, we think of, they are manufacturers and exporters, and we buy what they build. But lately, we're hearing that China is doing some dealing with people in the Middle East, very powerful voices. China is changing its import-export routine, and most of all, they're enlarging their army.
Yeah, I mean, here we are, the second largest economy in the world, certainly nuclear power. I think in many ways they hold the United States hostage in what we've been seeing in some of the rare earth minerals that are required for all the batteries. It's weaponry. I mean, we need these minerals, and they are the largest distributor. It's interesting lately too, after our debacle in Afghanistan, China comes swooping in and recognizes to some degree the Taliban government. But right at the front, they make an agreement that they will invest in their infrastructure to help them mine. The other place in the world that is very well known for rare earth elements is Afghanistan, and China swooped right on in there. I mean, it seems like we're getting outplayed at every turn by the other governments, superpowers of the world.
The Chinese are aggressive, a very, very aggressive people. And there's another note that we should talk about, and that is that the military budget in China has been boosted, some say by 7.2%. And we look over there and why would they be doing that? And why would they?
Yeah, well, I think that's the question. And ultimately, when you come to the end of the age, there's not a lot about China. I know Bob McGinnis wrote a book recently on China, and in interviewing him about that, there wasn't a lot specifically in the Bible, except you see this phrase, the kings of the East, at the end are players. They are major players that come and try to challenge the hegemony of the Antichrist. They're causing him trouble during that age.
And they're doing shipbuilding in China. When you think of China, you don't think of people who are building a lot of military ships. Talk about aircraft carriers, what used to be called destroyers, but they're not anymore. They carry much more powerful weapons now, rockets, long-range rockets, some ICBMs. They carry all kinds of things that we haven't even dreamed of, and the Chinese are building rapidly, building a very strong, they say the world's #1 Navy.
Yeah, well, here we are, right? So you have Russia doing what it's doing in Ukraine. Who knows the end of that? But China has been very reluctant to criticize Russia because they have their own Ukraine in the sense of Taiwan. So they've had their eyes on Taiwan. You talk about their Navy, they're patrolling those waters. And it's interesting that if they criticize Russia now, then Russia might criticize them later if they tend to do the same thing and attack Taiwan to try to regain territory. So it's interesting how these countries are very self-serving. They don't really care much about human rights, obviously, but they're looking for their own agendas.
It's power.
It's power.
It's power. There's a Chinese foreign minister. I just have it in a note in front of me. His name is Qin Gang, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. And there's a quote attributed to him lately. If the United States does not hit the brakes, but continues to speed down the wrong path, he says, no amount of guardrails can prevent derailing, which is war talk. And there surely will be conflict and confrontation. So here we have a very highly positioned Chinese leader shaking his finger at the United States. What do you think about that?
Well, and I guess we think about it in terms of prophetically. How is this, we're not just newspaper exegetes here, but we're recognizing that Jesus said at the end of the age, one of the characteristics would be wars and rumors of wars. So actual wars and rumors of wars. And we see that in the beginning, Revelation 6, right there. There's wars all over the place to take peace from the earth. But so in order to have those kind of significant wars, you need these players, these major players. So there's no doubt when we see the rise of China and even Russia and the United States, well, these power players, this time, I think my age, I'm 48, but watching over the past, in my lifetime, there's been a little confrontations, but there's been no world wars in my life, no Korean War, no
Right.
Vietnam War. I mean, maybe I was born, but so I don't really know war in the sense of my experience.
And this generation has had it in a very soft, sort of a gentle, but nevertheless constant letdown from a very high position in the global alliances, to a very low position, because we have leadership problems.
Mm-hmm.
We have internal political problems. We now have economic problems, and they are all building. And this generation, the generation that might encompass your age, is saying, what in the world is this? Well, to find out, they would have to turn the history books back to about 1920, 25, 28, up to 38, and look at what was happening then.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit in one of our next topics is propaganda, and how that works. But one of the things that came up this week recently was China brokering a deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And for our listeners, it's important to know that, we have the Abrahamic Accords. Israel's been trying to get Saudi Arabia to join on those. And Saudi Arabia has been reluctant. And the main joint coalition is basically Israel, Saudi Arabia, and others in their bloc against Iran. So now to see China broker this agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran is really shocking. It, number one, shows the United States being left out of the loop, even the European Union. It shows the importance of China. But Saudi Arabia, they have distanced themselves from the United States as being a partner that they can trust. Of course, there's accusations of things of Saudi Arabia killing one of their citizens, a journalist, but that goes back a couple of years. But you see the fact that Saudi Arabia would turn to China and to make this potential agreement with Iran, where they're going to now share ambassadors and embassies, that's a big deal for the Middle East.
Now, here's the question I have, and I hope you can answer this one. How can China, which is essentially an atheist country, or a country of religious tradition, very quietly practiced undercover, getting close to the Middle East? And Arabs have a Muslim background that's very, very stiff. Mm-hmm. What they believe, and they don't allow their beliefs to be compromised. And yet here come the Chinese. Yeah. What's happening?
Sadly, Gary, I think, and I know you would agree with me because it's scripture, but 1 Timothy 6, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Uh-huh. So here you have China being willing to partner and to buy Saudi Arabian oil and also trade and other things. Certainly Iran. That to me, that's why China has a part to play, because China has also a large economy, no doubt. Yes. And money drives the train. What I think is interesting is that recently, I'll read you a couple things here. Saudi Arabia said that we will not become partners on the Abrahamic Accords with Israel unless the United States has a security agreement. There's three things that Saudi Arabia said, and this is where China comes into play, where they kind of did a double deal. They said, we will not do it unless we have a security agreement with the United States. We will not agree to the Abrahamic Accords with Israel. This is Saudi Arabia, unless the United States gives us a civilian nuclear program. And number three, that they will reduce restrictions on U.S. arms sales. That's it. So the Biden administration is saying, well, we don't know if we want to give them all of that. Well, Saudi Arabia says, well, then there's no peace with Israel. But then, so now if Saudi Arabia, are they really going to get buddy with Iran? I'm pretty skeptical. Even though we have this agreement by China, I don't see it.
Well, the one that says no arms restrictions, all you have to do is look behind the curtain. And the arms race is on in the Middle East. Iranians they either say we have the bomb or we will have it day after tomorrow. And they're saying we're there. We're nuclear now. So there is a huge arms race in the Mideast, and it's financed by oil.
Yes, it is.
Ironically,
here we are.
Yeah.
And so what I see is that this agreement is contributing to the overall tension and really I would say confusion, because it seems like the current administration just doesn't understand the religious aspect of all the Middle East. But it's also going to contribute to what we know is a potential Psalm 83 situation with Damascus, even Ezekiel 38. And you have Russia, Iran now totally in agreement with one another, signed agreements of security agreements. So what does it do? Is it really peace? No, it actually increases the tension with Israel, of course. That's why we're interested, is in many ways, is Israel's right at the center.
Well, the Ukraine goes all the way from Cairo past the eastern shore of the Mediterranean Sea and northward through the Caspian and Black Seas and all the way up to Moscow and Kyiv. And that whole line, if you draw a line from Cairo to Moscow.
Yeah, here we are.
And it goes right through Israel.
Yeah, these increased sessions. So as we continue to watch this